Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the October 28th, 2020 meeting of the East Lansing Planning Commission. We'd like to start with a roll call, but Mr. Haywood, did you want to explain our new procedure? Before we do that, please. Good evening and welcome to the October 28th, 2020 meeting of the East Lansing Planning Commission. We'd like to start with a roll call, but Mr. Haywood, did you?
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
There we go. Thank you.
It's like we're set.
Okay. Did you want to explain the?
Yes. So for the Open Meetings Act has been amended by the state legislature, and it requires that for any public meeting, each member of a board or commission has to positively identify that they are attending electronically. If that's the case, remotely. They have to say, their name, that they're attending electronically, and that and then they have to explain where physically they're located. So, for example, if I were a board member and I were asked, I would say, David Haywood, I'm attending electronically from East Lansing, Michigan. So you have to give the location and the state. And it can be just general to the jurisdiction. It doesn't have to be your address. Just generally speaking, if it's a township, you can just say the township. If it's county, rural county, wherever you are. But you do have to say your general location and the state you're located in. And we talked about this, and we can probably just do this as part of the roll call. So when your name is called, you can just say, here, I'm attending electronically from location and state. And that will suffice for the requirement. Council should be adopting a policy to follow suit with this new amendment, I think, at their next meeting. So this is just kind of the precursor to that, since the council hasn't had the chance to formally adopt the policy, but we should be in line by doing this. That's all I have. Would you like me to go ahead with the roll?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right, we'll start the roll here. Cahill.
You're muted.
Jack, you're muted.
There we go. I'm here attending electronically from the bowels of my house at 647 Virginia Avenue in East Lansing, in the basement.
That's East Lansing, Michigan, of course.
Yes.
So, Sullivan.
Evening, attending electronically from East Lansing, Michigan.
Williams.
Hello, everyone. I'm here attending electronically from my home in East Lansing, Michigan.
Wagner.
Here, I'm attending electronically from my house in East Lansing, Michigan.
Wolf.
Here, attending electronically from East Lansing, Michigan.
Boyle.
Here, I'm also attending electronically from my home in East Lansing, Michigan.
Lapine.
Here, I'm attending electronically from my home in East Lansing, Michigan.
Kusler.
I'm here. I'm attending electronically from East Lansing, Michigan.
And Bowman.
I am here attending electronically from East Lansing, Michigan.
Well done, everyone. We have
a quorum. I will thank everybody. I will thank directly members of the commission today, but anyone else who happens to be attending for the new technology and that we're dealing with, it's still reasonably new. That particular portion was brand new tonight. And thank you in advance for your patience. All members of the public attending will have an opportunity to address the commission during public comment and during each public hearing. Each commission member will be called upon individually to speak during each item. A commission member may say pass if they do not have a comment for that item. Commission members are reminded to state their name before speaking, making a motion, and so on. and all votes of substance will be taken using a roll call vote. That said, we'll move us on to the agenda. You had an agenda in your packet. I would like to move a minor modification to that agenda, or at least entertain a motion to move item 2.1, which is a committee reports and is going to take a little bit more time than is typical. I'd like to move that down to new business so that those individuals who are attending with business before the commission can do so and move on their way. Ms. Schmidt has some things that need discussion, and I just as soon give it the full time that it needs. And so again, I'll entertain a motion to move item 2.1 to the substance of item 2.1 into new business.
We'll move approval of the agenda with that change. I think we can do it that way.
I think that's fine.
Support of Commissioner Wolf's motion.
It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Kusler. Is there any discussion on that motion? I'm seeing none. So let's call for a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Moving us on to item 1.3, approval of the minutes of October 14th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Kusler, move approval of the October 14th, 2020 minutes.
Commissioner Cahill, support.
Thank you. That's been moved by Commissioner Kusler and seconded by Commissioner Cahill. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call once again for a roll call vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed? That motion carries as well. Moving us on to item 3, staff reports. Mr. Haywood.
No report tonight.
Thank you. Announcements from commissioners. Any announcements? I have a couple of things I'd like to touch on. I think Mr. Haywood had sent around a note regarding the Open Meetings Act and the FOIA course, refresher meeting that's meeting tomorrow. Encourage everybody to attend. If you've not signed up yet, please let him or the manager's office know. And then in addition, for those of you that missed it, I would like to announce that our associate, Mr. Jake Parcell, defended or was engaged in the defense of his dissertation earlier today. He's presumably celebrating right now, and we'll have to follow up on all. I don't know exactly how it all works. Never have done that, but I think that's a big milestone. And so the next time you see it, maybe let him know. It was an interesting presentation, although I can't honestly say that I followed entirely everything that he talked about. It had to do with autonomous vehicles in the time of national pandemics. So timely and interesting. And we wish him well on the next step of that journey. Any other commissioner comments? Yes, commissioner announcements. Excuse me, Commissioner Wolf.
Concerning the training tomorrow night, I replied back to Emily that I would be attending a week and a half ago, and I haven't heard anything since then. Have the invitations or whatever, the links been sent out?
No, my understanding is that they'll be sent out once they have compiled everyone who has an interest in it, then they'll send that out, I think, in one blast. So keep an eye out for it, those of you who are interested and asked to sign up. So
we'll get it tomorrow. The meeting's tomorrow,
yeah,
right?
you'll get it tomorrow.
The last time I had done I can't remember what it was, but a similar training, the information arrived in mid-afternoon of the evening of, or the mid-afternoon prior to the evening of the event. So.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried because I realized I had not even gotten any acknowledgement that she got my sign up. And I started thinking, well, maybe it got lost.
Any other commissioner announcements?
I have a question about the training.
Yes, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. I am unfortunately unable to attend tomorrow evening because I need to be out of town kind of unexpectedly. But I'm wondering if you could share the materials with those of us who are unable to be there.
I will ask about that.
Hi, everyone. This is Nicole. I can probably speak on that real quick. So since this is attorney-client privilege communication ultimately tomorrow, I don't believe we're going to be recording the meeting, so we'll be sharing that information. If there are any documents shared or stuff like that, I might be able to send that out to you. But yeah, thank you for letting us know that you can't attend. That's all right.
Thank you. Yes, I'm really only interested in any written materials. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other, Commissioner Cahill?
I may have missed this right at the start of the meeting, but I was wondering who Nicole is.
Oh, Nicole is Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm the assistant to the city manager. I'm just helping out Dave tonight.
Okay. I wasn't sure if she was legal counsel or a member of the commission.
We had to measure your words a bit more, hey?
No, unfortunately, Rebecca wasn't able to attend tonight, so we had to bring in the big guns to get us out of a jam tonight. So thank you, Nicole, for being here.
Any other commissioner announcements? All right, then that'll move us on to item 5, communications from citizens. This is the time in our meeting when we invite members of the public to come forward and make comments to the commission on any item that is on our agenda or an item that is of concern that is not on the agenda. Of course, since we're doing this all remotely, we're going to be doing this in a slightly different way than we would typically if we were meeting in person. Each caller in our queue will have 5 minutes to address our commission. At the end of 5 minutes, they will be placed back on mute. Callers will be identified by the last 3 digits of their phone number, occasionally by their initials. When called on, you will be unmuted. If you do not wish to speak, please indicate so by saying pass. If you do wish to speak, please clearly state your name and address before addressing the commission. You're not required to do this, but it does help us in compiling the minutes for the meeting and making sure that we get proper spelling of names. That said, is it Ms. Mosteller or is it going to be, please will you invite our first attendee into the meeting?
All right, our first caller has a phone number ending in 715. Caller ending in 715. You may now address the council, or the commission, you just need to unmute your phone. Caller ending in 715, you just need to unmute your phone. I believe it's *6 to unmute.
Nope.
Hello.
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 We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I believe we're expected to comment on the red highlighted materials in the ordinance 1492. Is that correct?
We have an item under public hearings regarding ordinance 1492. That's the next thing on our agenda. You're certainly welcome to talk about it now, or you can hold your comments until the time that the public hearing is being held.
Okay, well, that's what I'm here for. So I guess I'll go back on mute until we get to that point.
Okay, and we'll call you back then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person calling in has the name Matt Burks. You may now address the commission. Just make sure you unmute yourself. Okay. And the next caller we have is with the name Matthew Nelson. You may now address the commission.
Pass.
All right, and those are all the callers we have on the line tonight.
Ms. Mosteller. That will move us on to item, and I'll note that we did not receive any written communications that didn't pertain to the rest of the business on our agenda. Moving us on to item 6.1, our public hearings, the first one and only one being item 6.1, the consideration of ordinance 1492, an ordinance to make necessary updates and corrections to Chapter 50 zoning of the city code. Mr. Haywood. All right, or is this Ms. Schmidt? Sorry.
No, that'd be me. Yep. So let me just real quickly get to the staff report. Okay, so Ordinance 1492 is part of our effort. Our city charter requires that every 10 years we have to examine our code of ordinances and look for any updates, changes, corrections, clarifications, and that kind of thing. So this was an attempt to do that. Just a little bit of a disclaimer here that as staff uses our code, we from time to time make notes about things that work, don't work, that need clarification for this very purpose. And sometimes we have a large volume of things. Some of the issues are too large to tackle. What we were hoping to try to do with this ordinance amendment was have a simple enough volume of issues to address that could be done in a fairly timely manner, preferably by the end of the year. So these are really kind of geared more toward simple fixes and changes, as opposed to larger, broader issues that staff might wanted to bring up. But anyway, so that's kind of the preface to this. So I'll just go through real quickly section by section to give you a little bit of orientation. So it's really kind of a wide spectrum of things that we're proposing to fix or clarify here. And some of them are very minor, some of them are a little bit more significant. So the first is section 5. It deals with definitions. From time to time, staff has struggled with the difference between accessory structure and accessory building. Although accessory structure is used infrequently, it does not have a definition. So we thought it would be wise to have that in there to make it clear what we're talking about and differentiation of those terms. We also are proposing a simple cleanup to the definition of building. Striking the term house, for some reason it gave an exemption to houses. Section 36 deals with the administrative approval for the zoning administrator. So when site plans are approved, subsequent modifications to those site plans can be done administratively if they meet a certain criteria. One of those has to do with building additions and setbacks. The standard is that if a building addition were to reduce the existing setback, in other words, the distance from the existing building to a property line by more than 5%, then it couldn't be approved administratively. And staff would argue that there would be very few circumstances where a building addition were under that 5%. And that the other parameters of that subsection already take care of a lot of the other issues that might come up as a result of any building addition. So we're proposing just to strike that item completely, of course, with discussion. But the next section is section 93, which deals with procedures for applications and review. This is really just a very simple addition to a new section of the code that deals with medical marijuana and adult use marijuana. We just forgot to put those references in that section, so that's just a cleanup item. Section 94, this is I think a more substantive issue. This, of course, is the section that deals with special use permits. And this item has to do with businesses that sell packaged alcohol. As you know, and we've talked about before, the State Liquor Control Commission has changed their method for notifying local jurisdictions about licenses that have been applied for, particularly with regard to packaged alcohol. They no longer tell us in advance that someone has applied. So we run into the circumstance where businesses will obtain the license, start selling packaged alcohol in their stores, and we don't know about it. And then we have to go either perform enforcement or get them to apply for a special use permit. And what we found over time is that there are a few specific problems associated with retail establishments that sell alcohol in this manner, particularly when it takes up a smaller percentage of their floor area. So what this is proposing to do is carve out an exemption to the special use permit requirement for retail establishments where 25% or less of their floor area is devoted to retail alcohol sales. So that's that's all for that section. Section 144 talks about encroachments, basically deals with swimming pools. There's really nothing in our code that tells us how to deal with a swimming pool in terms of placement, setbacks, and that kind of thing. So we've always kind of wondered about that. So we wanted to make sure that it was understood that we treat them as if they're a accessory building. In that sense, it gives a little bit more protections because a pool is kind of a different kind of thing. So it would apply the same setback standards as if it were an accessory building. Section 593F. This one's a little more significant. This is the development standards for the B3 zoning district. This is our city center, commercial, downtown core business district. And this deals with the height requirement for buildings in the district. Right now we have kind of an absolute 4 or 6 stories depending on its configuration. We use the term "or" in reference to height because we say it either has to be 4 or 6 stories or a certain height. Staff has always interpreted that to mean and there's a long history of how or why we got to that point. But I think now is the time to kind of settle this to make the text match our application. So we are proposing some basic changes to that. So, but also that it has to meet both of those. So when you change it to and, it has to meet both the story height and the height. So so we're making that suggestion at this time. There are a couple other options that I talk about, but we don't necessarily have to go down that road. But moving on further in section 593, we talk about maximum building and ground coverage. As we saw with the approval of the MSU FCU office building, we had quite a deliberation about what qualifies for allowing 100% ground coverage, building coverage. And so the Planning Commission, I guess, somewhat reluctantly agreed, and the council confirmed that interior community space should qualify as for the bonus coverage. So this kind of puts into text what the practice has been, at least on that particular development. Moving on to section 793, this is again just a simple fix. When the East Village District was amended in 2017 to allow for a height up to 140 feet, the graphic that's associated with that height did not show that bonus up to 140 feet. So we're basically just fixing the graphic to reflect the text. Section 812, this deals with parking ratios. I think we've had lots of history of discussion about the difficulty of applying parking ratios and how particular uses and their physical location can create some difficulties in meeting that code. And I know our code provides for many avenues of waivers and reductions in terms of the required parking numbers. But we kind of felt that there needed to be another pressure release valve in case there's circumstances where the situation is so unique that we need to kind of think outside the box and have a little bit more flexibility. So what this would do is allow really us to deviate from any of the parking requirements as long as it's associated with a special use permit. And that way you're applying discretionary standards for the use and the location and the situation that can protect against anything that might come out of that decision. Required stacking spaces in section 813. This is a result of the whole coffee shop discussion. So I think at one point we had applied the category other to coffee shops, and then I think because of change of personnel, and that might have been me, we applied it as a restaurant. And so this might either positively associate it with restaurants or put it in the category of other. And right now we're recommending restaurants, but of course we can discuss this. All of these proposed changes are, up for discussion, really a starting point to see how the Planning Commission feels about these, and we're willing to talk about these from any perspective. So the last category here is section 814. This deals with mixed uses and the application of general parking regulations. So right now, this section allows in a couple of B districts waivers from the absolute requirements or the allowance for reductions in numbers required. But we felt like it should be afforded to basically any mixed use development, wherever it might be. So with that, it's kind of a quick overview, and I'd be open to questions, comments, or public comment.
Mr. Hayward. Commissioner Wolf.
I have comments on most of these, and I think it would work best for me if we would just go through them one by one. I'm wondering about the caller who was calling in for that, if we should hear from that caller first before we start, or?
I don't have a problem with that. Typically, we would make commission comments first, but if we want to open up the public meeting, we can certainly continue our discussion afterwards.
Well, I was just thinking it might take quite a while for us to go through all, 10 of these or so.
That's fine. Ms. Mosteller, excuse me, if there's no other, I guess I'll just sort of see if there's any objection to that. I can't imagine there is. I don't see anybody scowling. So we'll open the public hearing for this item. And Ms. Mosteller, if you'd invite our 3 participants to come forward again.
All right, the caller with the phone number ending in 715. You may now address the commission. You just need to unmute your phone.
Hello.
Hello.
My comments initially really address the issue on accessory structure.
Excuse me,
seems
sir.
to include.
Excuse me, you're not obligated to, but it would help us in keeping the minutes for this meeting if you would identify yourself by name and potentially your address. Sure. Perhaps if you're a resident of the city, again, you're not obligated. And I'll know how to do so.
My name is Rich Shoemaker. I live at 141 Orchard in East Lansing.
Thank you.
And the issue of the change in the definition or the need for a definition of accessory structure. It seems to include a great many things, including fences and walls, and it doesn't specify what kinds of walls. And it seems to me that it's overbroad, and it invites inspectors, PACE, et cetera, to assume that they have a right to enter a property to inspect these various structures, which they don't have. In the past, City Council has understood that when they have these appearance or whatever ordinances, for example, I'm thinking of the one on upholstered furniture. It may not exist in the front yard, but City Council is on record as stating that they referred only to the front yard when they put that rule in place, not the side yard, not the rear yard. And having had the experience of city inspectors appearing in force, feeling that they had the right to enter and look at whatever they wanted on the property, I'm concerned about the idea that fences and walls are included in this definition. I don't see the reason for them to be included there, and I think they should be taken out.
Thank you. Could you hold on for just a second, Mr. Shoemaker? And in as much as you're limited to 5 minutes, if that's the end of your current comments, I'm going to turn to Mr. Haywood and see if he can provide some clarification as to what.
That's it. I have one other comment, but it's not really in your list of red items.
Oh, so it's another item on in the ordinance, but not part of a change it's for tonight?
Well, it's mentioned in the text there. It relates to the setbacks for window wells that are used for egress. And those have been allowed now to have a 45% penetration of the setback. And I guess my thought is that if they're going to allow a 45% penetration of the setback, then there should be a commensurate increase in the allowable height of walls and or fences facing that part of the adjacent property.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Haywood. I'm going to ask that you stay on the line. Well, actually, excuse me. We have two other people that may want to make comments. So I'm going to ask Mr. Haywood to respond to your first issue, and then I guess we'll go down and keep your talking points in mind as we continue to discuss this.
Okay.
Please hold on, though, Mr. Haywood.
Well, I mean, I think I didn't, I guess, really expect this part of the conversation, but really what we were trying to do, since the code does use, although not frequently, both terms accessory building and accessory structure, we were just, and only one of them is defined, we were just trying to make the code easier to interpret just from the sheer fact of one, what is it? What is, when we talk about things, what is this thing? Is it an accessory structure? Is it an accessory building? And although you might be able to positively identify it as a building, if it doesn't fall in that category, I guess you could assume it's an accessory structure, but we just wanted that definition to exist. I don't know if that answers the question or the concern, but it's really as simple as that.
Mr. Shoemaker, does that help? Oh, looks like he's, Ms. Mosteller, does it automatically mute him after 5 minutes?
Not automatically. I had just muted him just so there was no extra background noise.
Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Shoemaker, if you can unmute yourself, that would be great.
There we go.
I'm back.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thanks. Where are we? What are you expecting to hear from me? I guess I don't know where we're at.
I guess the question ultimately is, did that address your concerns? Ultimately, I think that it's a matter that will get discussed amongst the commission once you're offline or once you're comments are completed, but Mr. Haywood has indicated that it's basically a way of separating, say, references in the code to accessory buildings and things that are accessory to the primary use, but aren't buildings. I don't know. I
understand that. Okay, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
I guess I don't have a problem with that. The issue is I don't want to see something so broad that a member of the city staff might conclude that he has a right to some extravagance in his interpretation. And having had the experience that, for example, the federal courts interpret Fourth Amendment violations as relative to whether or not you put up a barrier to prevent entry to the property. And city staff have determined that if you put up a barrier to prevent entry, then they're free to examine other routes that don't lead through that barrier. And that's my relevant to my concern anyway, is that these guys seem to think that they have a right to do whatever they want. And I don't want the idea that fences and walls are included in accessory structure definitions to suggest to them they have a right to gallivant wherever they want to go and inspect whatever they want to inspect.
Okay.
That's my comment.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Ms. Mosteller, if you'd invite the next two people forward.
All right, the next two people we have calling in, I believe they're part of an agenda item in a little bit, but I'll still call on them anyway.
Thank you.
All right, the first caller is Matt Burks. You may now address the commission. You just need to unmute yourself. All right, the next caller we have is Matthew Nelson. You may now address the commission. Just make sure you unmute yourself.
Pass.
All right, and those are all the callers on the line.
Thank you. And with that, then we will close the public hearing, and I'll say return this to discussion among the commission. Commissioner Wolf, if you'd like to start.
Well, actually, I was hoping Mr. Haywood would go through it, or I don't know if maybe that would be repetitive. If we would just start at the beginning of the staff report. And like I said, I have comments on most of them, probably not all, but.
Okay, well, I guess we can just start with section, it's a good segue, section 5, the definition of accessory structure. Is that what you want? I mean, just item by item?
Yes, sure. And actually, that's one that I don't really have any comments upon. I will say, as we were listening just now, I did an online search through our code of chapter 50 and found that the phrase accessory structure appears in 6 locations. I don't see any, I don't know what to call it, any expected harm from defining it now that I see where it's used, and I can see there could be some benefit. So this one seems like a good idea to me.
Okay. Commissioner Sullivan, please.
Yeah, so similar to what Commissioner Wolf had said, I was looking for an example of it in the code. And if you look at page 22, an example is a household pet daycare needs to be enclosed fully within an accessory structure. So I think using a wall or fence makes a lot of sense under those circumstances.
Yeah, and I did notice something else when I perused through this. I did the same thing just now, and when we started working on this. But what we didn't have the time to address was the code uses another similar term. And I guess I realized this after we had kind of launched this thing. So in its accessory use, which is, I guess, neither a building nor a structure. And maybe this is the opportunity to explore what that means, that term is used quite frequently in the code. We have to look at many of the circumstances to try to determine, does it mean structure, or does it mean building, or does it mean use? And I don't think accessory use is defined.
Yeah, it's right under,
Beneath it.
Oh, it is.
immediately under this.
Oh, okay. Well, it is then. Okay. Strike that. I will address the caller's comment though about enforcement. The purpose of defining accessory structure was not for the purpose of gaining any enforcement advantage. So just for the record, that was not the purpose of this. It's just because we noticed that the term was not defined and would help us in our interpretation generally.
Thank you. Want to go on to the second one then, Mr. Haywood?
Yeah, so the second one is to strike the word house from the definition of building. So the definition of building, has this structure to it that, it's talking about a structure on the land and that kind of thing. And then it gives some kind of exception here where it says building in this sense does not include a mere wall, fence, monument, boarding, or similar structure, nor any house, car, trailer, or tent. And could not, we've seen this definition many times as we look at it. We always joke that, how could a building not be a house and that kind of thing. So, unless we're really not understanding the intent of what this means, I don't know how a house couldn't be a building.
Commissioner Wolf might have an idea.
No, just to me, it looks like an outright mistake. Because, for example, within the first sentence, it talks about a building for use as a dwelling. Now, if that's not a house, I don't know what
Right.
is. So it pretty much explicitly says a house is included, and then says it is not. So
The only thing I can think of is some other temporary house or some other term that they didn't include with that. Okay, so if there are no other concerns there, we'll go to the next one, which is the site plan approval, the administrative.
Hello.
You're muted, Dan.
Sorry, Commissioner Cahill, I was paging down and was not looking at the screen. Please proceed.
Okay. I'd actually wanted to speak on the first change. And we moved on before I got a chance to. But I wonder what we're doing exactly with accessory building means a subordinate building or portion of the main building. And then accessory structure starts out the same way, means any subordinate building. So it strikes me you shouldn't have the same thing in two different definitions. And then we've also got accessory use down below that. So what strikes me is we really need to gather any areas of our code that use any of those three terms together so that we can actually consider the implications. And maybe we don't need all three terms. Why is subordinate building in the second definition, accessory structure, when it's already in the accessory building? I don't know the implications of what that might mean when it comes up in different sections of the code. So I would like to gather all uses of this together so we can make sure that throughout the code we're doing what we actually intend to do.
I saw Commissioner Wolf's hand.
Yeah, I don't see a conflict between those two, between accessory building and accessory structure. The way I read it is simply that accessory building is a narrower category and accessory structure is a broader category that includes the accessory buildings. So anything that is an accessory building would also be an accessory structure, but not necessarily vice versa. And then I also don't have a problem with accessory use, except we do have some oddities in the code, but an accessory use is definitely a use. It's not a building. The one exception we have that has always bugged me is in a number of our districts under accessory uses, we have sheds listed, which are obviously a building that has a specific use. I think that's why they were put there, because of the understood use of a shed. But I think we need all three of them, and I think they contribute to the code.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's going to be any confusion in the code. I haven't seen all of the examples of all three of these, but I think that accessory building, or accessory structure rather, if I'm reading this correctly, could be a useful catch-all of sorts, where like in the pet daycare example, for setbacks, if you're talking about maybe it isn't all contained within a fence, maybe there's a garage or another accessory building in the corner, you could refer to all of that surrounding with one single definition.
All right.
Does it make sense?
Oh, no, you're good. I'm just, if we're satisfied with that discussion, then move on to item regarding the setback. Yep, thank you.
So this is the part that would remove the 5% rule on administrative approvals for setbacks.
This came up at council, I believe. Commissioner Wolf, did you have questions about this?
I agree with this one. It's fine. I have two suggestions about the wording of the staff report. And this is obviously up to Mr. Haywood, but I'll bring them up anyway. If you look at the paragraph about this in the staff report, not in the ordinance itself, the final sentence says, under this same section, staff still has the discretion to forward to City Council if any of the provisions in 36K are not met to his/her liking. First of all, the final phrase, I think that would be better to perhaps say are not met to his/her judgment. I think the staff are really not supposed to apply their liking to things, but their judgment. And then the second would be that near the beginning of the sentence, it says, under this same section, staff still has the discretion to forward to City Council if the provisions are not met. I think that is too weak. In fact, if the provisions of 36K are not met, they are obligated to forward it. And I don't think they have any discretion at all under that circumstance. I don't know if Mr. Haywood sees it differently, but
that's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
That was all I had on that. The correction or the change seems fine, a good idea.
All right. Sorry, I've lost my page here. The next.
Okay, so the next Yeah, the next item is section 93. This is just adding the references to medical and adult use marijuana in the procedures for review of special use permits.
Any questions for Mr. Haywood about this?
It's fairly straightforward. And then section 94, this is the one exempting or accepting a special use permit requirement for the packaged alcohol sales for retail establishments that devote less than 25% floor area to those products.
Any questions for Mr. Haywood about this item? Commissioner Wolf?
Yes. In this one, I find the wording confusing, and I think I have a way to improve it. It's one specific word. This section does not apply to businesses selling alcoholic beverages for off-the-premises consumption only if less than, the position of the word only in there seems to put it together with that second phrase, only if less than, but I don't think that's where it belongs. I think what this is trying to say is well, let me say, I would move the word to say this section does not apply to businesses selling alcoholic beverages only for off-the-premises consumption if less than 25% of the sales floor, et cetera. I think what it's trying to say is if a business happens to be licensed for on-premises consumption and they are also licensed for off-premises consumption, they do not get this exception, right? We do have some places that are licensed for both.
Vice Chair Boyle?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Wolf's reading. I think the only is supposed to define off-premises consumption. And I would solve it by saying selling alcoholic beverages for off-the-premises consumption only, comma, provided that less than 25% of the sales floor area is devoted to the sale of alcohol beverages.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I guess I would still prefer it at the front. It reads better to me, but.
Well, that's fine. The only does, where the only is doesn't make a difference to me. But having just if less than, I find that confusing, which is why I'd recommend provided that.
Well, I have one other suggestion in that same phrase that I think helps it a bit also. Where it says off the premises consumption. Off the premises is what's sometimes called an extended adjective or a compound adjective or an adjective phrase. And it really should have hyphens in it. So it should be off hyphen the hyphen premises. And I think that makes it read much better as well.
Sullivan?
Should the word only be replaced with and?
I don't think so.
No.
It has to be clear that they can't consume the alcoholic beverages on the premises in order to meet this exception.
No, I think we move the only and then we replace the only with and.
Oh, so you're not
Yes.
replacing
No.
And you're
Correct. Move only as Commissioner Wolf
and then
suggested, and then
okay.
replace it.
So that's similar to the vice chairs provided that, right? So they have the same. Are we, Mr. Haywood, are we all right? Are we following that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this section?
Oh,
Yeah, Commissioner Wolf?
yes, I did have a question. The final phrase after alcoholic beverages, it says items related to alcohol storage or consumption which do not require a special use permit. Can you give examples or explain what that refers to?
Well, I'm gonna tell you the background in this. This particular section was written by the city attorney, and then departed shortly thereafter. So I was not, and I had the same question. I settled on. So I'm not. To back up, so we're not able to ask that person what they meant by this. So my guess is that it means things that are sold with alcoholic beverages that are generally sold with them, right with the product. And I don't know if that means cups or I don't know what, but I'm assuming other things related that are in the category of alcoholic consumption that otherwise wouldn't be sold if the product weren't displayed. But I could be convinced otherwise.
I'm especially puzzled by alcohol storage. Is it somebody who sells racks for wine bottles or liquor cabinets
Or flasks?
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that kind of. All right. So it's trying to cover what you might call the entire liquor section of the store, which might have some of those items. I wish there was a clearer way of saying it. It seems a little odd as it is, but all right.
5144. If there are no other comments on 94.
Just had one.
Yes, please, Commissioner Cahill. Maybe I'm sorry I'm not seeing you. Maybe
Okay.
wave.
It just it relates to that end language there about the alcohol storage and consumption. It seems like that would lead to endless dispute over what it means. I mean, is it if you got a bottle of cherries over in a different part of the store, now we got to calculate how many square feet that takes up, and you've got the olives for that could go in a martini over here.
Ping pong balls.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we really have to, unless we can find out what's intended for that to mean, we should probably get it out of there.
Mr. Haywood, would it be possible to get I don't know, I certainly can get a legal take from the new attorney and see what their thoughts are.
Can do.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, Commissioner Sullivan?
I agree. I think that's a great point. Like even things like solo cups, for example, it's very subjective.
Coolers. That sort of thing.
All right, item 5144.
Okay, so this was an attempt to, I guess, define swimming pools as an accessory building, and the reason it's kind of I know it's an awkward location for this, but we didn't really know where else to put this or how to address this. But the swimming pools are I think that the term is only used maybe once in the entire code. And secondly, it gives us very little direction on how to apply setback standards to this structure, I can call it that. But we have in practice been applying the accessory building setback standards that are listed in section 301 in the table in 301 to give, some definite understanding of where pools can be located. So in that sense, we wanted to make it explicit in the code how it should be applied. And I'm open for suggestions if this is the incorrect location for this, or where it's a better location, or have marching orders to figure that out for the next time we meet.
Any comments for Mr. Haywood? Commissioner Wolf?
I think this is the perfect location for it. I've looked at this section quite a few times when I was on the ZBA, because a number of our appeals dealt with things in the yard and encroachments, and I think it fits perfectly here. And you're using pretty much the same language that is in number 2 about accessory buildings. It looks just right to me. I do have two other minor things I would suggest changing in here, if you'll consider them. In number 2, accessory buildings, porches, and decks. I would like to see it say unenclosed porches for the second one. And the reason is that in the second sentence up above, in the where this section starts, enclosed porches are specifically called out as being part of the building subject to the setback requirements. So then the remaining items are ones that it shall not apply to. If you don't read that first section and you only kind of jump ahead to number 2, you would think that any porch not exceeding 1 story would be exempt. And that's not the case. So I think it really would be better if it said unenclosed porches there.
That's a good change.
And then a really minor one in number 5. The comma that's there is unnecessary and doesn't really belong. Cornices and gutters, comma, which extend into, should just be cornices and gutters which extend into the required yard, etc.
Right. Any other comments? Looks good. 5593.
Okay, so this addresses the building height in the C3 district.
And it does look like you're looking for some advice or guidance or opinion on this one.
Yeah, so I guess the basic issue of it is the term "or" between the story height and then the overall building height. We've always applied and gone through great lengths to explain to, I think, council and the planning commission about that we interpret it as "and." So we've held applicants to both. So we're switching that to "and," but in doing so, we felt like it needed to, in order to kind of set that baseline as the code intended, to say at least in front of those, so that you do achieve, it's a starting point.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think we get the gist of, and I saw Commissioner Wolf's hand up.
Yeah. In some ways, this is not the best time to be addressing the height, I think, because this is going to come up in the form-based code in just a few months. It's going to be in front of us for that. And it treats it quite a bit differently than it appears in here. But if we're going to do this, I think what I would like to see, it's sort of a combination of what's written in here and what the options that are covered in the staff report text. First of all, I would set the minimum building height shall be at least 4 stories, or shall, I guess you don't have to say at least if you say minimum. So the minimum building height shall be 4 stories. And I don't actually have language for this. I'm just trying to give you the idea of it. Then to go above 4 stories and up to 112 feet would require a special use permit. And then to go up to 140 would be the same as it is in here right now with the 3/4 vote of council. And the reason I suggest it this way is that it's pretty close to what we have in here right now. It's not a drastic change. It's consistent with our master plan for this area. And it's consistent with the draft form-based code. It's not identical to any of them, but it's consistent with all of them. And it gets away from the and or business entirely, I believe. I think it could be written in a way that that confusion does not exist anymore.
So would it only make reference to story height?
No, the way I said it was the minimum shall be 4 stories. And I think we want to measure that in stories because we're trying for density. We're trying to say the land downtown is valuable. We don't want 1 and 2 and 3-story buildings. We want to build up. We don't really care at the minimum what the height of the building is. If somebody wants to build 4 stories, I don't think we have any worry that it'll be too short in feet or too tall in feet. So I think we could leave that off for the minimum. But then we do want to allow them to go up to a reasonable limit, somewhere around 100. I picked 112 because it's in here, without any real concern about how many stories they put in that building, a building of that height. We just let them build to that height. We require the special use permit because the B3 in places is immediately adjacent to single family houses. And there may well be locations where we don't want to allow by right a 100-story building to go up right next to our neighborhood. In the form-based code, it has built-in protections against that with the feature that it calls neighborhood manners. So our special use permit is the closest sort of control that we have on that. And I'm pretty sure that's the reason that the requirement for the special use permit is in here right now for those buildings that are going up to that type of height. But I'm open to if people have other ways to address it, that I'm interested in hearing them.
Commissioner Cahill.
I wonder whether we're really concerned about the number of stories. For instance, someone might come in that would maybe want to make a development of lofts as lofts have become more popular, where maybe they're 15 or 20-foot ceilings, something like that. Do we care about how many stories there are or how high the building will be overall?
Commissioner Wolf.
I guess I'd be repeating what I just said. I think we do want a minimum of 4 stories. Again, we're trying for density downtown. We don't want to have short buildings there. But as far as the height of those goes, I don't see a situation where I would really care. If they want to devote 15, 20 feet to one of those stories, I think it's fine. I think we do need to say, if it goes above a certain height in feet, then it needs the special use permit. Again, because of the effect that a really tall building could have on a neighboring residential property.
Commissioner Sullivan, did I see your hand?
Yeah, so I think priority-wise, height obviously is more important than how many stories are in that tall of a building. But keep in mind, if there are really big floors in that building, then density will also be lower. So if that is a goal, we will not be achieving density if we have very big floors in the building.
I think the way you've outlined it seems, oh, sorry, Vice Chair, please.
Yeah, I think that the ordinance reads better if we use either feet, height, or stories, both in minimum and maximum. To me, it doesn't make sense to have a minimum of 4 stories and a maximum of 112 feet. I mean, we're either going to count it in feet or in stories, or we're going to count both feet and stories. But to have a minimum of 4 stories and then maximum of that's measured in feet, just that makes for an awkward ordinance, to me anyway.
Commissioner Wolf.
Well, again, as I explained it, it makes more sense to me that way, because the minimum is a density issue for us. I think Mr. Hay, or in particular Ms. Schmidt, if she's in on this, could explain that, because that's when she was here when this was put in there. And the goal specifically was to create enough activity in a building, which you do by the number of stories. You know, that tells you how many residents will be in it, how many workers, etc. The idea was to get density downtown. So our minimum concern is with stories, not numbers of feet. But then when you start going higher than that, our real concern is the number of feet. I think it was Commissioner Sullivan said that if we really don't care if they put a lot or how many stories they put into a tall building.
I think you make a good point that the sort of the concern changes as you move from, say, minimum height, or what we'll call minimum height, to the maximum height. I guess so the way you had outlined it, Commissioner Wolf, sounds workable to me, particularly because you've looked forward, as I did not, to see how it meshes with the form-based code, or at least, you know, in your rough estimate, or your estimate that it fits at least roughly. I don't really see a concern in East Lansing for this, but I think I'd relate a story that I had read regarding, this happened to be in Manhattan, where clearly land values are much, much higher, where buildings were built based on a story count, and then sort of the mid-rise, the mid-height of the building, are very tall, like as you'd said, say up to 100 stories, but the middle height of those stories were significantly larger than normal, say 40, 50 feet, but it was really only counted as a story and significantly pushed up the height of the building, right? So that there was sort of I think it was actually used as mechanical space, or, you know, leftover, or who knows what. They were testing rockets in that space. I don't know what. But the point is that added one floor, right? So that the story count didn't increase significantly, but the height did. And so I see, that's what I see the sort of in option number one could potentially happen if there's no restriction on height, but, or excuse me, there's no restriction on height, but there is a restriction on number of stories. Stories could be whatever height you'd like them to be. Commissioner Wagner, did I see your hand up or were you scratching? Okay, all right, thanks. Commissioner Wolf?
So, I guess getting back to I did not actually look at it in the last day or two, but I think this is consistent with the way the form-based code treats it. I think it's identical, that it has a minimum number of stories and a maximum in feet. So we are, once you see the form-based code, you are going to see something very, organized or in the way I'm describing.
And I think in those cases, just sorry, Vice Chair, that if it's been a week since I've looked at it, but my recollection was that there was a range of floor to floor heights that would be potentially permitted that could provide that sort of that shift, as Commissioner Cahill had mentioned about loft height spaces and so on. Vice Chair?
Well, are we going to see this ordinance again, or are we likely to act on it tonight?
I thought Mr. Haywood was looking for some direction this evening and that we would see it at a later meeting.
Because then what I would suggest is that when it comes back, we have the relevant sections of the current draft of the form-based code. So those of us who aren't on that committee can
Fair
see
enough.
how it fits.
Fair enough. Let's make a point of doing that the next time this comes forward. Commissioner Wolf?
I was hoping that maybe giving this feedback to staff, they could come up with new possible suggested wording. Like I said, I did not sit down and try to write it out myself. And I think that might be enough without necessarily delving into the form-based code, but we could perhaps do both.
Yeah, we can certainly take a stab at that language and then bring, at least just as a attachment, the relevant portion of the proposed form-based code so you can see how it's just at least see it, not necessarily do a bunch of analysis for it. Yeah, we can do that.
All right. Any other comments on?
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, we haven't heard much from Mr. Haywood. I'm curious, do you think this would address the problem? Is it a reasonable way to start thinking about it, or?
Yeah, I do. I like the rationale and I understand where you're coming from with the starting with, minimum story height and then, capping it in terms of feet, because I think when you start getting taller, feet matter more than stories, is in terms of impact. I think people can argue that anyway, but I do understand how it's clunky in the sense that you're switching terms. I mean, I get that, but I think ultimately it probably works better that way. And another thing too, I think when you are at shorter, quote unquote, heights, the height you pick makes a big difference or a big impact on the number of stories and how the building's designed and that kind of thing. I think it has a bigger impact there. So if you pick at a level that's not as critical, a story height, there's more flexibility built into the ultimate design and functionality of the building. Hard stop.
Any other comments on 5593? All right, 5593G.
So this is the addition of the reference to interior community space for the bonus allotment for lot coverage in the B3 district. So this goes back to the approval for our MSU FCU, it just basically codifies what action is taken for them.
Any questions or comments? Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, I am not a fan of this addition. First of all, I was opposed to allowing it as a bonus measure for the credit union. That's been approved, so we will have that shared community space in their building. I certainly think we don't need another one. I'm skeptical as to how useful this really is, and I just can't imagine that we need another one. On the form-based code committee, we spent a fair amount of time talking about incentives and the bonuses that would be given for them. And one of the principles that we talked about was that if you're going to offer incentives, your list of incentives should be relatively short. It should be items that your community values very highly and really, really wants to get developers to provide. You shouldn't have any wasted elements on there. Second, a corollary to that is that if you have too many available incentives, it's almost certain that one or maybe two of them are going to be much easier to achieve than the others. And what you're likely to get is that incentive used over and over and over again. And you won't get some of the others that you might wish for more. The interior space one is just too easy. In the case of the credit union, because of the type of building it is, they earned 3 square feet of bonus for every 1 square foot of amenity. In our code, there's 3 different levels. Well, it's shown right in the area we're looking at here. It ranges from 1.5 up to 5, a ratio that you earn. They earned the 3. The staff report for that gave them credit for their entire second floor, which was 12,000 square feet. Now, I guess maybe that's fair. I would have cut it back myself, but I mean, it was giving them credit for the lobby and the coat hanging area and the food preparation area and every single thing on the second floor. They needed 4,000 feet of bonus, or the coverage area that they were short of was just over 4,000 feet. They could have earned that with only 1,500 square feet of community space in their building, which is just about 1/8 of their second floor. So that gives you an idea of what they could have done. Now, they didn't try to do that. They obviously gave us more than that. I would still say they didn't really provide 12,000 square feet, but so for all those reasons, I would not like to see this added as another incentive.
Other thoughts? Vice Chair.
Reminds me of the old adage, hard cases make bad law. So we had a building that was a great benefit, at least I think it was a great benefit to the downtown, in a difficult site where they needed a lot of coverage, and this was the way we achieved it. Whether or not that has resulted in a proposed addition that we don't like in the long run, I guess, or is not appropriate. Since it is may be granted and not shall be granted, I guess I'm not as troubled by the inclusion of this as a bonus for the lot coverage or whatever we want to call that. I mean, it's not something that they have to be given if they have the community space, but that might get them granted the bonus allotment. So I think the fact that we may have been uncomfortable with it in the credit union, although I was not uncomfortable with the credit union, I don't think that's a reason to not include it in the ordinance personally. So I don't find it objectionable, particularly since it's a may and not a shall.
Other thoughts? I'm of a similar mind to the vice chair that actually the couple of things that the credit union has demonstrated their willingness in the past to provide. This wasn't their first project in which this community interior space was provided. Again, perhaps sort of basing that decision on their past examples, it was not ideal, but I also was not bothered by the idea of making a sort of a creative and very loose application of the description of, I'll say, exterior space, what is abundant light and air, to provide a space that's going to be made available for use by the community. I was comfortable with supporting it as well. There is one other example actually that was not in the residences where they made use of a interior / exterior space. The pull-up garage doors that run north on Grove Street from Ann Street or Albert. It's just another example. Now, in that case, as Commissioner Wolf had pointed out at the meeting, indeed, there was abundant light and air potentially available because there was no separation between inside and outside. But like the vice chair, I'm comfortable with the idea that we're talking about may including that is a potential amenity that doesn't concern me or overly concern me. Commissioner Cahill, then Commissioner Wolf.
I wonder if we might want to consider something similar to the art requirement, where a building would come up that, such as the credit union, that really needs all that space there. And to try and meet our requirements there, they end up creating this public space inside the building. Wouldn't we want to consider an option perhaps where they could pay a certain amount to the city that could be used for creating public space?
Commissioner Wolf, Commissioner Williams, or maybe Ms. Schmidt, was that not part of the amenity bonus talk at one point about or Mr. Haywood, excuse me, those of you that have read it, sort of privileged information, I guess, but there was some talk under the form-based code of providing some sort of payment in lieu of, as Commissioner Cahill has mentioned. And I don't know, I'd have to go back and check, but whether that was stricken or is that still, I remember we sought advice from the city attorney about whether that was a good idea or not.
I recall we had some general conversation about it, but I don't think it was connected to a community space option.
I remember there was something about parking structure and so on. Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, and we did talk about the difficulty of what it would mean would be setting up another fund that the city would have to manage. And you wind up with a situation where you might get some payments in, but it might not be enough to do anything with. it's going to be extremely difficult for the city to, let's say, purchase any land downtown to offer to increase the open space anywhere. I would say it's pretty much impossible to do that. And if you look at this, the way this was written, that's really what it was intended for when it was originally written. And for the chair, you mentioned the area in the residences. I don't know if you have actually seen what they're talking about, because it's actually part of the restaurant.
Right. Is it not
Okay.
the?
It's not a community space. It's
No, no.
simply,
I understand. Is it not the garage doors that open up along Grove Street that right? It's where they served drinks and food during the when the street was shut off, correct?
I think so. Yeah. It just opens up the dining space to the outdoors. That's really all it does. It's not a separate space.
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
Ms. Schmidt, I sort of asked you a question and then didn't let you talk. My apologies.
No, I think Commissioner Williams answered it. We talked about it, but felt that it would be difficult to manage and get enough money into the fund to actually purchase property in a downtown area.
All right. If the objections for this item are noted, and if there is no other discussion, then we'll see this again, of course. And of course, council's going to see it as well. And I know that our liaison follows these meetings closely, and so she'll be aware of how the discussion ran. Any other discussion on this item? All right, then that'll move us on to section 50. Oops. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Wagner. 5793 building envelope requirements.
So this again just corrects the building height graphic to reflect the additional the code amendment, and I think it was 2017 to up to 140 feet.
Questions or concerns? This is on page 42 of our packet, or 35 of 47 of the code. Not seeing any hands. And we can come back if you'd like. Item 5812, required parking ratios.
So again, this creates an ability to depart from the requirements for parking space ratios in the event that there's a situation that really doesn't fit. And the Planning Commission and Council want to basically depart from the required ratios, that they could do so by use of a special use permit.
Questions or concerns? Commissioner Wolf.
I have one wording suggestion in this one. The word pursuant says may be modified pursuant to an approved special use permit. It didn't sound exactly right to me. I looked through our code some more, and normally we say subject to. We use pursuant in a different use in the code, but I think it would be more consistent to say be modified subject to an approved special use permit. But I have no objections to the change. It's probably a good one. It sort of reflects what we have been doing in some cases already.
It does. Any other questions or comments? Then moving us on to, is it 5813?
813. So this goes just the pretty basic thing, but we apparently had difficulty in the past categorizing coffee shops. And we can either, the most recent interpretation is that it's in line with a restaurant, since there's, clearly a food and service type issue related to it. The only reason that I hesitate on this is that it could be categorized as other, and I think in the a little bit more distant past, that's how it had been interpreted. And I can see that in the sense that it can have a wide range from the business to business, you know, can have a wide range of demand and location. So it might be more appropriate to put that under other and let the planning commission determine that when it's proposed.
Is it your expectation that 10 would be insufficient in that situation?
Actually, what my hesitation comes from that some situations requiring 10 stacking spaces might be too much. I think in some circumstances we've seen a couple of applicants, both Big B, have demonstrated, or at least made the case for why they would be required to have less, and the Zoning Board of Appeals has supported them on at least one of those. Of course, we've seen the opposite in other locations and other establishments that have a pretty amazing capacity to fill stacking spaces. So that's why it might be more appropriate to be under other. But this is where we started.
Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, this whole area seems very problematic. I don't think we, as the Planning Commission, can really determine from an application how it's going to perform when they open. I don't think the ZBA can do that. I'm not sure staff can. The new Big B on Delta, Grand River and Delta, I have seen a number of times with the line now extending out onto Delta Street. So I guess they convinced the ZBA that it wouldn't be a problem. I can't tell you how often it is, but I have seen it probably 3 or 4 times now. Another example that I see frequently, the drive-through pharmacy at Meyer on Lake Lansing. I see here that only requires a stack of 2, which is just about what they have. Does a stack of 2 mean 2 in addition to a vehicle being served, or 2 counting the one being served?
No, it's counting the one being served.
All right, so theirs is probably 3 then. And I've seen 6 there, and they come out and they extend out and block the driveway there. So I don't know what the solution is. Probably my preference would be to add coffee shop along with restaurant. I think it's certainly the one that's most consistent with, you know, it wouldn't compare with the Chick-fil-A out in Okemos. I don't know if anyone has seen how long the drive-through out there gets. I swear I've seen at least 20 in line. The line actually kind of snakes around at certain times, but
well,
so that would be my preference to put it with restaurants as it's shown here, but I'm certainly not saying that's a perfect solution.
Not to drag this meeting out any longer than it needs to, but some of the things that we wanted to do when our question came up to amend this code was asked much larger questions about our code. Obviously, we don't have the time for that, but one of them would be in line with, if it's so difficult to categorize any one of these uses, you know, why are we doing this at all? And is there a different way to do this? And maybe we, you know, ask ourselves another day, are these, you know, lines that back out into their own driveway or even the roadway in some circumstances, is that, I mean, if it's going to happen anyway, regardless of how we try to apply it, why try? You know, anyway, another day, but certainly something we need to ask ourselves. If we're sitting here, we can't, you know, yeah. So anyway, that's one of the things we wanted to do, is at least have it on here, how we should address this one, and then move on.
It sounds like you're aiming for a doctoral dissertation then, Mr. Haywood.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Commissioner Cahill, please.
I think we do have to look at the stacking for some of these drive-throughs. I'm not familiar with the Big B over by the park there, but I do encounter the Starbucks that used to be the old Burger King. And if you're making a left turn off of Grand River, which is usually high traffic, not an easy left turn normally, and you make the left turn onto that street, I'm not sure the name of it. It's right next to Tropical.
Stoddard, I think it's around there somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, is it Stoddard? Okay. You can pull into the street, you know, beating the traffic that might be coming down Grand River towards you. And you find cars that are stopped and backed up, trying to make a left into that Starbucks, which is all backed up. And then you have cars, they might go around it, but then you've got traffic coming the other way. And I don't know if there have been accidents there. I'd be very surprised if there hadn't been some. But it could be very dangerous if someone follows you, you can't move because these cars are trying to make left turns into that Starbucks. That car might be stuck out in Grand River with traffic bearing down on it. And so I think we have to think about sort of the locations and requirements that we have to put on. For instance, at the Starbucks, there should be no left turn, certainly, so that traffic coming off of Grand River will be able to flow down Stoddard. And I'm thinking at the other one by the park, you know, if you're coming up, I can't think of the name of the street, Laurel Valley or something. If you're turning right in there, that's fine. If you're turning left and then backing traffic back up towards Grand River, that creates a hazard, I think. So I do think we have to consider some new controls or conditions that we should put on drive-throughs as they come.
Commissioner Wagner. Yep, thanks.
Jack, I hear what you're saying, but it sort of depends on the popularity of the place, right? That Starbucks is horrible for traffic, but I think it meets the 10 per window or maybe even more. It's got a pretty long, you know, so it's the popularity of the restaurant, or the place. I don't know how. I think I sort of like the other category because maybe it depends on if it's next to a large thoroughfare or, you know, where it's located, but I don't know. I think it's very problematic, and it really would depend on the area. I'm also thinking about the Barry Ames, that weird triangle up where Grand River meets Coolidge, and that seems to be like a horrible place, you know, for a dry cleaner. But they definitely have the 3 per window, but I've seen almost a lot of accidents there. It's dangerous.
Well, I think with regard to the Starbucks, a simple no left turn would alleviate the danger problem of traffic backing up into Grand River.
Right.
Although now you've got traffic going down Stoddard in front of the houses. If I'm living there, I'm probably not very happy about that either. I think it's something we need to give some thought to.
Other comments? Vice Chair.
Well, I think, you know, the real problem is that everyone with a coffee shop wants to have a drive-through, and they cause all sorts of problems. You know, as we hear, if they didn't have a drive-in, then we wouldn't have cars stacked, and pharmacies too. But I think it's coffee shops, because particularly since certain hours of the day is when they stack up. But I don't know what the solution is, because they sure all want to have a drive-up window.
Absolutely. Other comments? And our final 50-814, general parking.
So this deals with mixed uses in B2 and B3 districts. So the parking standards grant waivers in certain ways for mixed uses. So where you can demonstrate that the two uses are so different that the parking requirement is at different times and that kind of thing, you can have a reduction in parking. But for some reason, the first one limits the exception to just the B2 and B3 districts. And I guess from my perspective, if there were other mixed use situations, I think the RM 32 even allows it in some ways. And anyway, in other circumstances, I just wonder why this isn't afforded to any circumstance where there's a mixed use and could demonstrate the same thing. I mean, I think that's the whole idea, is to me, is to try to give some benefit where you can demonstrate that uses differ substantially. That why require parking lots that won't get used?
Yeah, Commissioner Wolf.
I guess I don't object to the change. I think I can tell you a little bit about why it's the way it is. For a long time, none of our B districts allowed residential uses at all. And I'm pretty sure the B2 and B3 are the only ones that allow them now. Isn't that correct? Pretty sure there's nothing in B1 or B4 or B5. So when it was decided to allow residential in those, then of course the parking issue came up, and these are the two where it was expected to get the most, what you might call true mixed use, a very significant retail or commercial component on the ground floor, and then a very significant amount of residential above. The other ones you mentioned, I think, are pretty minor. You know, the RM 32, I think RM 8 has some allowance for certain kinds of business uses. They're really pretty minor. I don't know if that helps with it at all, but they weren't really considered at the time. The focus was on the newly allowed residential in the B2 and B3 when this was written.
If memory serves, there was some similar justification that was provided to permit the significant reduction in required parking at the hub. And it might not have been this particular portion, but I remember making comment on it at the time that you know, the developer took not only the 50%, but then an additional chunk of parking away from their required count. Again, I offer this just as sort of as a follow-on with what Commissioner Wolf has said, is maybe that'll give some direction as to what a solution would be. I mean, in as much as it's not neither B2 or B3, it's East Village. That 50% reduction was permitted there by council when that came before them. Commissioner Wolf?
Well, the East Village District was created after this was written, and I thought it has its own parking statement specific to East Village that's similar to this.
I actually just paged back a bit, hoping to see it as a remnant of what we had just looked at. I see Ms. Schmitz turned her camera on, so she apparently has an answer outstanding. But I do remember some discussion about that when this came before council. Ms. Schmidt?
Yes, in the code that you're looking at, the ordinance, right below the statement about B2 and B3, there's a catch-all that says that the city council can give any property, whether it's residential, commercial, any district, a waiver of parking based on where they're located. And the hub basically took the reduction based on that they were they were right next to MSU and the bus route and everything. So that's why they got the waiver. So that's already built into that section of the code.
That's where it is. I remember it was because I remember the discussion was sort of, it's sort of automatically provided for B2, B3, but not necessarily for other districts. And that would be, that was ultimately council's decision at the time.
Right.
Thank you. Perfect. I was looking in the wrong place. It was right in front of me. Any other discussion on this item?
Well, if we're through with that specific one, I want to bring up another one on that same page.
Yep, go ahead. You've shown. Yes, go ahead. Yep.
So I think we're agreed to strike that B2 and B3.
Yes.
Yeah. This is something that I emailed Mr. Haywood about this afternoon. While I was looking at this, I noticed another error in the code under number 7 on this same page. Towards the end of it, it has a reference to subsection F. I don't know if you can easily see that. It's the 4th line from the end of number 7, or the 6th, 7th line overall. It refers to something granted under subsection F above. And I pointed out to him that seems to be wrong. There is no F that's related to it nearby. There's an F that's on the top of the page, but talks about something entirely different. So he and I both think it has something to do with number 6. I'm not trying to solve this tonight. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And I think Mr. Haywood will be looking at it before the next meeting. I told him that the sentence that it's included in, I've read it at least 5, probably more than 5 times, and I can't even understand what it's trying to say. So I'm hoping he understands it better. But the reference to subsection F is definitely incorrect.
Yeah, I in kind of what we discussed, we almost think it refers to the number 6 above that in some way, but we got to dig into it a little more to see how that might apply or what it means.
How difficult is it to go back and find earlier intact versions of the code where there might have, things were numbered differently and there was actually an F? Is there any record of the code in that form?
Yeah, each section has a reference to its, how it's been amended over time. It can take some digging, but we can probably find that.
Yeah.
It's possible at one time this, the 1 through 8 were lettered.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a good idea, because that would make number 6 F.
Yeah.
A, B, C, D, E, F. Maybe that's what it is.
I think that's what happened. And it could have been that there was a reference to that before it was codified. And then when it was codified, everything went to a standard numbering system.
All right. Any final comments on the changes proposed? All right, then we'll see this at our next meeting or at a future meeting. And that'll move us. Oh, Commissioner Wolf, sorry.
Actually, there's an addendum to the staff report. I don't know if anyone read it. And I wanted to ask Mr. Haywood what he wants to do about that. It was an issue that I came across back in June that has two other references to code that has now, in this case, been deleted. Mr. Haywood included the email exchange that we had in June and then in September. And To me, it makes sense to.
I think it's a simpler issue. It's just a incorrect reference, right?
Well, no, well, it was correct at one time, but then when we were changing the regulations on building height, we eliminated that definition. It used to be the definition where the 140-foot height was allowed, which was somewhat restricted. And then council decided to expand that to the entire B3. And so that definition of the restricted area was no longer needed and got deleted. But there were two other nearby parts of the code that referred to that area.
Yeah, I want to say that the location changed, that there's still a reference to it, but it's in a different, it's the overlay, height overlay district. And I think it's in section 805. I'm correct. That's the reference to the height overlay where it can go to 160 feet. That's that reference, correct? That you're referring to?
I believe at the time it was the 140 foot, but maybe I'm wrong. So you're saying that's in here somewhere?
Yeah, so let's see. Well, I can dig into what your comment about the references to that number, but I thought it was referring to the height overlay. But if it's only referring to the 140 feet, then that might be a different citation.
Yeah, it is different. I'm looking at the current height overlay district in 50-805. And just a minute. If I look at the email, yeah, the old text, which is highlighted in blue in my email, said within that portion of the area zone bounded by Grand River, Bailey, Albert, Grove Street, Linden, Abbott, parking lot, and it goes on and on. Whereas the definition in 805 is much, much simpler. It is a different area.
Okay.
Now, I don't know, maybe that area would make sense for the current intent of those other references, but I don't know.
Okay, I'll look into it and see if I can piece it together. Maybe I did that too quickly.
Thank you. Okay. That said, that will move us on to item 7.1. This is our old business. Consideration of a site plan and special use permit application for 3225 West Road LLC to build two new buildings, 4-story, 107-room hotel, and a 4,015 square foot medical marijuana provisioning center. The property is zoned RA, Residential Agricultural District. Oops. And I've got Mr. Parcell as the author. Mr. Haywood?
Yeah, thank you. So
really straightforward, actually. It's easier than that, isn't it? Please.
Yeah, so this goes back to the issue about whether we proceed with this proposal, since it's kind of changed from the provisioning center to now a hotel and retail area. But we were contacted by the owner, having been noticed about the rezoning request, and they brought to our attention that the purchase and sale agreement had been canceled, and that the owner currently has no interest in pursuing with any development proposals for the property, including rezoning. So they have submitted a request to withdraw the application, citing their cancellation or termination of the purchase and sale agreement. And obviously we've felt there was some communication disconnect with those who are working to push the development proposal, brought it to their attention, and seeing that they concurred, and apparently there's some communication problem there. And so they've also submitted a confirmation that they are no longer pursuing the proposal. So at this time, it would be appropriate to move to accept the withdrawal.
Is there a motion? Or a motion would be appropriate. How about that? Commissioner Wolf?
I move that we accept the request for withdrawal from 3225 West Road LLC to build 2 new buildings. It doesn't actually give the address. I guess it's the same as the LLC at 3225 West Road.
Is there a second?
Support.
Thank you. That's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Kusler. Is there any discussion on that motion? I'm seeing no hands, and so we should have a roll call vote for this, please, Mr. Haywood. And just to clarify, it's not necessary, I presume, to identify a location for the votes. You smirk, but all right. Then this is just a yay or a nay.
Cahill.
Yes.
Sullivan.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Wolf.
Yes.
Boyle.
Yes.
Lapine.
Yes.
Kusler.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Unanimous. The motion passes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Moving us on to item 7.2, consideration of an application to modify a site plan and special use permit from Gateway of East Lansing LLC for the property at 300 West Grand River Avenue to convert retail space on the first floor to 6 dwelling units. The property is zoned B2 Retail Sales Business District. Mr. Haywood. Oops.
Thank you. Yes. So this goes back to the proposal for the conversion of the commercial space to efficiency units. On the last meeting, commissioners expressed concern about the design of the building, parking, and accessibility of the proposed unit. The applicant has provided a revised or a description of how they plan to meet the intent of the accessibility, and we've also addressed the window design and I believe parking. We've also amended the conditions of approval to include restore the hours of operation, which were inadvertently removed in the staff report in the last meeting, so those have been restored. And with that, I would take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Haywood?
I think the applicant deserves a medal for sticking around here.
We'll let them know. Actually, they could hear you, so they'll presumably thank you for that. There's at least one representative from the applicant here. Any questions for Mr. Haywood regarding the proposal in front of us tonight? Commissioner Wolf?
At our last meeting, we talked about a desire from some of us to clarify the relationship between conditions 13 and 14, and that hasn't actually changed in here. I would still like to see that, as I think it was Mr. Cahill who brought that up, that it appears that we are requiring 2 different things from them. And we actually intend to require only one of the 2. So before we vote on this, I would like to correct that somehow to make it clear. In case maybe everyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's the fact that they have to have the, what's the housing called? Diversified housing. And there's a requirement that they have to have universal design standards in all the new units. And that's really an either or is the way it's intended, but it's not written that way. So we don't have to deal.
Just to clarify, you said items 12 and 13?
13 and 14.
Okay, thank you. All right, my bad. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Haywood? We're going to ask Mr. Burks, and if I don't know if I see there's another phone number on in attendance here tonight. If that's Mr. Holman, then Ms. Mosteller, could you please ask Mr. Burks and any of his associates to come forward? This is not a public hearing, so this is just the applicant.
All right, the three representatives now have the ability to talk.
I guess I'll pose a question. If you had anything else you wanted to add to the question or the presentation so far. Oops. Thank you, Mr. Burks.
Are you just asking a question in regards to 13 and 14?
I'm just curious if there was anything you wanted to add, Mr. Burks, that we obviously were in receipt of your drawings and receipt of the letter from you regarding your proposed modifications to what was directed at the last meeting. And I'm just curious if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
I think it's pretty clear. I mean, we discussed it with ETN, and I mean that was the approach they wanted to go with it. So, you know, we didn't have object to particular type A units. It's just they, you know, there are just some exceptions they'd like to pursue.
All right, thank you. Just stick close if you would. Any questions for the applicants? Right, then I guess I'll take it back. If maybe a question will come up. What is the pleasure of the commission? I mean, for my own part, I find their argument regarding the use of in this particular case, the wider showers and the stacking laundry facilities. I find it convincing that would be made available in all the units, but could be swapped out if called for by a tenant that wanted to have a fully accessible unit. Appreciating the fact that Vice Chair Boyle's very legitimate concern, I think, at the last meeting, that this is just a slight step above what would generally be permitted in this zone, and that is to say that all the units would be type B units, like type B dwelling units. Keep in mind that many of the, and I think Vice Chair, you were part of the study that recommended that these changes. You'll have to remind me of the study committee's name, but to provide greater accessibility to more units, and that the concern was as much about I'll say visitability, that is to say access by somebody who was differently abled to somebody that's not differently abled, but basically getting access to and access to and access throughout the unit. So the visibility idea was as important as the idea of full accessibility. And so again, in my way of thinking, the exterior elevation changes, the interior blind changes, and then the fact that the units, there was one type A dwelling unit. I find that to be an acceptable solution that's provided by the applicant. Other thoughts, Vice Chair Boyle?
Oh, a couple of things. One is I'm not sure that the showers can be modified in the A1. I think they're not quite meeting the A standard. I'm not sure that the showers can be modified. And I would need to be reassured that the washing units could be swapped out, because it looks like the dimensions are a little different for the combined unit than the dimensions for the stacking unit. But assuming that they could be swapped out, certainly that's not a problem. But going back a step, and going back to Commissioner Wolf's, I think it was Wolf's comment about how we're going to phrase this, if we're going to include it in the conditions. I guess what I would, now I've got to go back here. What I would like to see is to combine the last two conditions into one. And let me get down here. Missing having something in writing here, I mean paper. Okay, combine it to read that two of the first floor dwelling units shall be owner occupied housing or housing offered to and restricted to residents 55 and older, or restricted to low to moderate income housing, comma, or in the alternative, all of the new first floor units shall be constructed to meet Universal Design Standard A, so as to be accessible for use by a wide range of persons regardless of age, size, ability, or disability. And I said A because that's the way I would propose that it be sent to council. And if council wants to fine tune it by accepting the A.1, I think they're the ones who are in the position to do that. My proposal was to give the developer an alternative to the diversity requirement, and that was to make things accessible. And my intent, when I said accessible and used the language that we used previously, was to meet the standard for the A-type units. So I would, and I don't know if we need to get a motion without this revision and then I move to revise it, but that's what I would do. I would say either 13 or in the alternative, then they have to be universal design standards for a type A unit.
I guess I would suggest perhaps you make that as a motion and you can choose whether or not to modify the condition at that time.
Okay.
You're comfortable doing that? That's great.
All right. Then I would, let me see. I would move that in the matter of the request from Gateway of East Lansing for a modified special use permit to convert retail space on the first floor to 6 dwelling units located at 300 West Grand River Avenue, we recommend approval by the City Council for the modified special use permit subject to the following conditions, which are the first 12 conditions set forth in the staff report, plus a 13th condition to read as follows. 2 of the first floor dwelling units shall be owner occupied housing or housing offered to and restricted to residents 55 and older, or restricted to moderate income housing, comma, or in the alternative, all of the new first floor units shall be constructed to meet universal design standards as specified in type A, so as to be accessible for use by a wide range of persons regardless of age, size, ability, or disability. And then the final condition that's set forth as 15 in the staff report would now be condition 14.
Wolf, support.
It's been moved by Commissioner Boyle or Vice Chair Boyle and seconded by Commissioner Wolf. Is there any discussion on that motion? Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, I'm going to raise a technical question. I think I'm willing to go ahead with this, but technically, I'm not sure that our code really allows us to offer this option. It'll be interesting to see what council does with it, but the language that's in code condition number 13, the original about the diversified housing, is a requirement in this zone. It's not an optional thing that can be traded away, as I remember the way it's written. So I'm willing to try this. It'll just be interesting to see how it goes through.
Vice Chair, please.
I agree. It's not provided in the code. I mean, under the code, they've got to do one of these three things that are set forth in the first part of condition number 13. I think we discussed when it came through before that it might be awkward under these circumstances to do that. And so I just was offering this as an alternative, as something they could do, because it's easier to make modifications like this when you're building a place than to go in after it's been built. So now would be the time to do it. It would give something that we don't have much of in the downtown area. And it would be certainly be up to council if they were going to offer this as an alternative. And if council offers this as an alternative, it's still up to the developer if they choose this or if they choose to meet the other ordinance requirements.
Good points. Commissioner Wolf?
And just given my own choice, I would prefer to see them have two of these units devoted to moderate income housing. That would be my preference to see, but I'm willing to go along with offering this option to them.
Any other discussion on the motion? All right, seeing no hands, then Mr. Haywood, could we please have a roll call vote?
Bullman,
Yes.
Kusler,
Yes.
Lapine,
Yes.
Boyle,
Yes.
Wolf,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Cahill.
Yes.
It's unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. This will, the applicants that I presume you're all still listening, this will go before City Council at an upcoming meeting, and you'll have an opportunity to address this motion at that time. Thanks for coming tonight.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. That will move us on to item 8, new business. At the top of the meeting, we readjusted the agenda to include item 2.1 under new business. So that will bring us back to the memo regarding form-based code. I'm scrolling, sorry. There we go. And the timeline for completion or ultimately submittal to council. Ms. Schmidt had specifically asked that we give some thought to how we'd go about advertising and gaining input on this new code that's going to be in front of us shortly. Ms. Schmidt. did you have something you wanted to add, or did
Yeah,
you?
I do want to add that since we discussed this at the subcommittee level, we do potentially have an opportunity to have public outreach as part of a practicum project through MSU. So it's even more important that we get some direction from Planning Commission, some ideas. With COVID going on, it'll be a really unusual public participation process, and how can we reach out and get as many people as possible involved, and what categories do you think are most important to reach out to for review of the document, and how we can make sure that we reach as many community members with the opportunity to weigh into this process, especially before we turn it into an ordinance. Because as you know, it's very difficult to make a lot of changes to an ordinance that's already drafted.
Any thoughts? I'm going to start by asking a question. Would it be typical for you to send notices in the same way that you do to people that were, I can't remember what the boundary is, but within, say, 200 yards of any project that's going to be before the Planning Commission, that list of addresses that comes at the end of every staff report?
Would we do that for an ordinance?
Or, yeah, for at least in the areas that are likely to be immediately within the boundary.
That's a good question. That would be an opportunity that we could definitely do that. But we'd want to go broader, obviously, but those are really good places to start.
Sure. I was presuming that's the sort of thing you were looking for. And as I say, it's really more of a question generally speaking, an ordinance wouldn't have that kind of direct, right, immediate impact on specific properties.
So we would want to do it every property within the entire boundaries, as well as 300 feet from the boundaries.
I guess that's the question. It was really more, is it typical to have been done? I would think that you would start certainly with those within the boundaries, and then whether is it 300 feet? Is that the typical?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, those are likely to be impacted as well. I've got a couple other thoughts. I would presume that these are sort of low-hanging fruit, but I don't know, is there even a landlord property owner association? Presumably they would want to know, but my guess is that they'll probably get hit by that first sort of broad mailing or broad distribution. Similarly, any of the affected neighborhood associations would presumably be notified as well, or if not the the management, president, vice president, and so on of neighborhood associations, somebody within the neighborhood is going to presumably raise it, and it would be discussed at neighborhood association meetings.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams, thank you.
I came on board after the Shaping the Avenue committee process was completed, but would there be some blueprint through that process? It seems as if there was a lot of community outreach there. Is there some process that was helpful?
For what process? I'm sorry, for
the
Avenue?
Comprehensive plan.
The comprehensive
plan, yes. Yeah, we did neighborhood associations, things of that nature, but we actually held public outreach meetings throughout the city so that it was easy for people to come physically and review the document and give us input. And that's something that's a big thing that we're going to be missing out on. So how do we compensate for that, I think, is the biggest question. If there's something that we can do above and beyond what we normally do.
Commissioner Kusler?
Yeah, I mean, as for advertising, I think all of those things also work. But you're going to have a lot of interested stakeholders too, that especially ride Route 1 CATA's Route 1, which is that entire ride right there. So getting stakeholders just that see that route every day, we could advertise just in CATA. But actually having the charrettes, I think that's what we called them for the master plan, if I remember correctly. But
Yes.
you know, having those online, it's going to be tricky, but that's everyone is navigating that right now. You know, my younger sister, who's an educator, all the educators that we know, I mean, everyone is navigating this climate, and it's tricky. My thought is that we try to figure out who we have that is going to engage themselves, and then we try to figure out ways to split those groups up, because you're not going to be able to get everyone successfully in on a Zoom call to be able to have those conversations. Realistically, I think staff needs to figure out what that right number is, and then figure out how to have concurrent meetings, either facilitated by a professional or someone on planning staff, to kind of help those conversations along. But it's going to be very hard to bring in everyone at once. I think you're going to have a number of smaller meetings and then bring those meetings to a bigger table and try to work through it that way.
All through Zoom.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I mean, I was mentioning it to my family today that normally, if this would have been at City Hall, I would have left my house 20 minutes earlier than I would have, you know, sort of walked upstairs. And so I think probably if, you know, if some sort of public gathering is convened, and I suspect you will, if it's done several times, it would make, you know, basically it would double up that effort that, I don't know, you must have done about a half dozen as you went out to different neighborhoods and yeah, that maybe a similar number of meetings, much like this, with you know, the same information provided or presented every time, but with presumably different people attending. I think that the real trick is going to be people that don't, and there aren't that many presumably, but that don't have access to
computer,
camera, and they can participate by phone, but then they wouldn't benefit from the graphics. And the graphics, as you know, are a pretty significant part of what the code entails. Commissioner Lapine.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to what Commissioner Kusler was mentioning. In the current role that I hold, we develop a lot of state plans in partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services, and everything has shifted, obviously, to be virtual. So I've seen it done really successfully, having, I mean, meetings as large as like 300 to 400 partners and stakeholders all in one Zoom meeting, but then leveraging, like, using breakout groups in Zoom to divide that up into having like 20, we try not to have more than 20, but 20 people in each individual breakout room with one kind of facilitator that's there with like a set of like core 3 to 5 questions to make sure everybody's moving through the questions and to document notes. So I could certainly see a way to move some of those in-person forums that were held for the plan that you're referencing, being able to move that onto Zoom. It would just, it requires having facilitation support, both on like the technical end, when like half of the people can't figure out how to use Zoom or how to mute their microphone.
Right.
But then also to like ask the questions, have the facilitation skills to probe when needed and document the conversations. But that's, I mean, totally, from my vantage point, totally doable. It might seem slightly different than usual, but.
Yeah.
It's actually an excellent point. I've not ever been in a meeting large enough to require breakout rooms, but my wife and both of my children talk about them all the time. That basically, I presume that you stay where you are and you just see a grid that has different faces in it for minutes.
And if it's nice because if you know the people that are attending, if you did like a registration beforehand and you had an idea of like where there were commonalities, if people were from like one neighborhood association versus another, you can, before the meeting, you can assign people to breakout groups. So it'll automatically kind of put those people through the ether into their own group. Or you can just say, I want as many breakout rooms as I want with 20 people in each, and it'll just randomly assign people. And then you can message in each group. Like you can send messages or say you have 10 minutes left, like here's the button to ask questions, and then everyone can come back together in one large space at the end. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's a great process. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts? It's going to be a trick, as you well know. I think the better thing, I think, is to err on the side of too many meetings or too much information, because it's going to be far too easy for people to just fall behind. Or, if you couldn't attend the meeting in Glencairn, you could go to the one in Pinecrest before, right? So it's the same sort of thing, except that if you couldn't do the one on February 8th, you can do the one on the 15th. That, even if that's not sort of your targeted neighborhood or your targeted group, as Commissioner Lapine has said, that at the very least, there's an opportunity to jump in. And I don't know, will it also be possible to make the printed and non-printed, the digital printed material available, to a broader, can it be emailed to people? Yes, of course. Can it be made available online? Sure. Can hard copies be made available to people that don't like the electronic versions? I presume so. It's a pretty thick document, and it's better seen in full color. So it's, there's potential significant printing costs there. Any other thoughts? I'm not sure, does that get you at least in the direction that you were looking?
Yes, I think that helps a lot. With the practicum class, that would be a really good way to do the breakout meetings too. I mean, that's something that they could work through with us. So that would reach a lot of people.
Did you say, is this School of Public Policy or
Planning?
Planning. Okay. All right.
Okay, great.
Any final thoughts? Any other thoughts? All right. Keep this in mind. If something comes to you, then obviously let's get in touch with Ms. Schmidt and follow up. Barring that. The timeline. We have a copy of that available for, we presumably, it was all in our packet, but you can see where we stand now. Oh, I'm sorry. This was supposed to be a committee report. And one of the things I was going to mention is that we met, and this will lead right into Ms. Schmidt. We met October 21st, and we got through just about everything except for the uses section. And we've got another meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, the 4th at 9:30 a.m. with the understanding that we might be peeking at our phones periodically to see if there was any election results that are trickling in at that time. And so that said, Ms. Schmidt, the timeline is all yours.
Yeah, so the timeline is probably going to shift a little bit, but for the time being, we're looking to start the Planning Commission work session the first week of December, and we'll be reaching out to you soon just to make sure everyone's available. It could be shifted to the second week in December, but we're looking at the first week in December to kind of really kick off the meeting. We will have a detailed memo explaining what each of the sections are doing and any major changes that were done. And we will be giving you a copy of the original and then the final, so that you're not going to have to worry about comparing all the different markups. There were probably at least 9 to 10 versions of the document by the time it was all said and done. So we'll start that at the beginning of December, hopefully end up the Planning Commission's final recommendations the second week in June, and then take it to council. This is something that, especially since we have a fairly new council, we're expecting to kind of drag that portion of it over 3 months and give them time to really view the document, give them an introduction to form-based code, give them the document, let them ask questions, and then hopefully by mid-April, we'll be able to have them approve it for community input. So when we send the document to City Council, I would like to have a well laid out plan for public participation. Of course, that will change, but at least give them a good idea of what we're planning for public participation to get it out there. And then from mid-April to the end of June, we hope to roll out the public participation, and then over the summer, do all the ordinance changes and put it in ordinance form. During all this time too, we'll have the city attorney doing their thorough review, and hopefully we'll have a document ready to approve or not approve by the end of the summer, beginning of fall. So that's what we're looking at right now. Any questions, concerns?
And just by Commissioner Wolf?
Speaking optimistically, I would point out that there could be a small chance that by the time we start public participation in May, it might be possible to have certain kinds of public meetings.
That would be nice.
If we're lucky.
Yes, that would be nice.
Nothing to count on, but.
Yeah.
Outdoors, maybe.
Yeah. That's
Actually,
not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea at all.
Yeah. I'd vote for that.
All right. Any questions from Ms. Schmidt about the timeline? All right. Thank you. That'll take us back to the agenda for commissioner concerns. I will note that our next meeting is scheduled for the third week in November 18th, rather than and we only have one meeting in November, but it'll be if presuming we have business, it'll be the 18th. That was reflected on the timeline we just looked at as well. But just by way of clarification, that it was Veterans Day is the day of our typical meeting. Any other concerns?
And then our next in December, our regular meeting is the week of Christmas. Is that right? The 23rd.
Oh, the 9th.
I'm looking at the timeline. There's the one on there's the first. No, excuse me. Yeah, the 11th, 13th.
Yeah, that's
I'm on the
obviously
wrong
in here.
page. Sorry, I'm in the wrong section here.
I believe it's the 9th.
Yeah, I'll correct that.
So we have two meetings scheduled in December, or we don't have the one on the 23rd.
We don't have the one on the 23rd.
Okay, so the idea is we'd have a work session the first week in December and a meeting the second week. Okay.
That looks correct. Thanks. All right. Any other concerns? All right. If not, then a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So
Moved.
I heard two voices, and I'm thinking it was Commissioner Wolf and Commissioner Williams.
Well, I'll support then.
All right. Then Commissioner Williams moves and Commissioner Wolf seconded. All those in favor, let's make this a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:39. Thank you, everybody. Be safe.
All right, thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Aye.
Bye.